What is good, everybody? Welcome into the Wednesday edition of the Daily Betslip. We got a bunch on the show today that we're excited to dive into with you as you get all your bets prepared. Ben Heisler, my guy Peter Dewey, alongside with producer and director Joanne Stoner. Pete, what's good? I know that the NBA Finals continues today. Your Boston Celtics. I shouldn't even say your.
Don't say, yeah. Please don't say my Boston Celtics, please. I never that. Never.
As a New York Knicks fan, that might be hard to say, but it is your team that you've bet on over the course of the NBA Finals, and the odds have shifted. If we've gone and seen the Warriors open up as a big favorite to now Boston stealing home court advantage. As far as this series goes, like, did you ever expect it to be this neck and neck from the very get-go? Boston's now minus 115 to win the series. I know you're pumped for game 3.
Yeah, I took Celtics in 7 when we did our pre-series picks, so I kind of assumed we get a pretty good series here. I was surprised the Celtics stole game 1 on the road after playing in a game 7 3 days before, especially with how good the Warriors have been at home. But at the same time, I kind of did expect them to win one at home because they haven't lost 2 games in a row all playoffs. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in game of the night. But I'm excited for game 3 tonight. It should be. Hopefully we get a close one. We've seen 2 not so close games. Hopefully we get a close one tonight.
That would be ideal to be able to get something that we can have some back and forth, past the first half. So we will, of course, dive into that in the game of the night. Also coming up in just a few minutes, a terrible, terrible bad beat of the night for anybody that was on the Brewers. We'll dive into that in just a second. Plus, some fun stuff ahead. Our best bets for the night in Major League Baseball. I know that, Pete, you got a couple on the board tonight. I got one once again for the WNBA. Excited to go over that with all of you guys as well. A few NBA props mixed in along the way for best bets tonight. That's coming up in about 5 minutes or so. Actually, even a little bit less, probably 3 minutes from now. And then also some opportunities. If you haven't bet on the NBA Finals MVP, do not worry, do not fret. Pete and I have a couple names that you are going to want to consider because it's still very much wide open, whether you're looking at some of the favorites or a couple of long shots that have an opportunity over these next possible 5 games to make a difference. There are a few names that I think you're going to want to consider, especially some with some very big odds on the board. But Pete, let's dive into an absolute heartbreaker for anybody that was betting on the Milwaukee Brewers last night. Normally, the most insanely reliable, one of the more dominant, feared names of closers that you can find, Josh Hader. Boy, did he really give it up for anybody that had the Brewers money line last night.
Yeah, this was a tough one because Josh Hader is quietly having one of the best closer seasons in the history of baseball. To start the year, he had 19 appearances, allowed 4 hits, and did not allow a run. He had 18 saves over that stretch. So yesterday, when he comes in to protect a 2-1 lead against the Phillies, if you're a Brewers bettor, you're like, oh, this pretty much shut the door, game over. And he gives up not 1, but 2 solo home runs for his first 2 earned runs of the year. Brewers go on to lose 3-2. So that's a brutal one because Josh Hader really been lights out. Like I had known he had gotten off to a good start. I hadn't realized until I went back when we were doing our pre-production for the show and realized he hadn't given up a run all year. So that's just a brutal beat if you were on the Brewers last night.
Yeah, absolute killer for the Brewers that came in as a favorite in that game. And it's amazing on the other side, too. All of a sudden, the Philadelphia Phillies, without Joe Girardi hanging around, have seemingly woken up. We've also seen the Braves starting to wake up a little bit, too, in the NL East. Now, for anybody that's a Mets fan, you would think that the lead that they currently have compiled should be good enough for them to cruise the rest of the way. But, Peter, it is the New York Mets. Do you think there should be any concern with some of these teams slowly starting to play a little bit better baseball?
Right now, I'd say no, just because they're doing this all without Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom. I think when they get those guys back eventually, some point midsummer, they're going to have an even, it's going to be another big boost then. But I will say the Braves starting to turn things around. Like I believe they're 16-11 with Ronald Acuna in the lineup. So like complete shift since he's come back. So that would scare me a little bit more than the Phillies. Phillies have won 5 straight, but like this team has the same issues it's had for years. They have a spotty bullpen, and now Bryce Harper needs Tommy John, so he can't play the field. So you're stuck DHing him every single night, which is it kind of limits them in terms of what they can do offensively. So I wouldn't be too worried about the Phillies. The Braves, maybe a little bit, but at the same time, like the Mets have a big lead and they've been hitting and they've been playing with guys out of the lineup, still playing well. So I wouldn't hit the panic button at all. But obviously, if the Mets go into one of their, late June, early July slides, like we're all going to be like, oh, well, it is the Mets.
Right. I always think of that clip from Family Guy where Stewie's in a Halloween costume. He says, "Man, Halloween so far has been a bigger letdown than being a Mets fan." And it cuts to the game, and the public address announcer says, "Opening day, and here's the first pitch, and the season's over." So they're sitting pretty right now. They're 18 games up, but you have the Braves on a 6-game winning streak. They're still leading all of baseball in strikeouts too. Phillies all of a sudden starting to get hot. You're right. As long as nobody puts the ball in play against their defense, then they should be able to get right back into this thing. But I think just maybe the New York Mets should be okay. We'll see whether or not the Mets make our list of best bets for today. I'm excited for us to dive into the slate. You are looking at, oh boy, I misread it. 2 different NBA props on the board tonight, which we'll dive into. But go ahead and kick things off with your top MLB pick of the day. You're looking at a strikeout prop in the American League. Who do you like?
Yeah, so I'm looking at Jordan Lyles over 3.5 strikeouts in this game, going up against the Chicago Cubs, your Chicago Cubs. So I apologize, Ben, in this matchup. But I like Jordan Lyles a lot in this spot. They're playing the Cubs, like I said, are 22nd in baseball in strikeouts per game this year. They average 8.68 strikeouts per game. And then on top of that, Lyles has cleared this prop in 7 of his 11 starts this year. So been pretty consistent in terms of getting the strikeouts, and his floor is what I really want to look at. 10 of his 11 starts and in 10 straight since his opening day start, he struck out at least 3 guys. So you're basically guaranteeing yourself he's going to get you the 3, and then can he just go over and get the 4th one? So I like him a lot on this spot. He's not going to have the greatest, strikeout numbers. His advanced numbers are pretty average, but at the same time, facing a Cubs team that strikes out almost 9 times a game, I think he can get to 4 tonight.
I think that makes plenty of sense. For whatever reason, the Cubs have not found a way, despite having some solid offensive production in their lineup this year. Their pitching's been kind of what's killed them as of late. But yeah, the offense can go in some really bad stretches when it's all about trying to be able to advance and get some guys on base. They've been better at putting the ball in play a little bit more this year. They were dreadful at it a season ago. But for whatever reason in the month of June, Peter, you're right. Like the Cubs have just been swinging and missing a ton. And for even someone like Lyles, it's something that we've done over the last couple of days in some of our MLB props. Cole Irvin, Mitch Keller were a couple of guys that hit for me the last couple of days. Their strikeout props were not particularly high. We're talking about 3.5. But because you're going up against teams with a lot of swing and miss, as long as they're able to go 5+ innings, it almost hits every single time. So I think that's kind of a strategy. It's not necessarily going for the big strikeout pitchers, but the teams that just aren't doing a good job of putting the ball in play. So I think that's probably the way to go. Let me give you my MLB pick, and then we have a couple from our Twitter community, including a winner from last night's show, which I'm excited to share with everybody. So part of the beauty of being able to do this show is we get a bunch of winners from our BetSided fans that are able to hang on with us and hang out and be able to submit some of their picks. We'll get to those in just a second, but I'm going to go with a hitter against your guy, Jordan Lyles, tonight, and that's Ian Happ. Happ's gotten into a really nice run as of late. He's got a hitting streak going, starting to showcase himself as a top 9 pick that the Cubs drafted several years ago. And part of what he's done well is take a lot of pitches. Like he has a walk rate this year of over 14%. And he goes up against Lyles that's going to give up plenty of hard contact. And that's something that Happ has thrived on. He's also been a good fastball hitter over the course of this year. So I like the over 1.5 total bases. He was one of my potential picks today for Daily Dinger, ultimately ended up going in a different direction. The Orioles hit 5 home runs against the Cubs in Baltimore. It's going to be a bit of a muggy day over at Camden Yards. I could see Happ destroying this prop with just one swing of the bat, but he's driving the ball well. He's starting to raise his average, raise his on base and his slugging over the course of the last several weeks. He's turned himself into a really nice hitter after some ups and downs and a bit of inconsistency. But we're talking about a guy that's got an 8-game hitting streak right now. seeing a ton of pitches in the process. And his average exit velocity right now is upwards of about 95 miles per hour. So he's hitting the ball really hard. He can travel in Baltimore, especially with the dimensions back. I think Ian Happ, going up against your boy Jordan Lyles, he might get those strikeouts, but maybe this is one of those bets, Peter, where both of us can hit tonight.
Yeah, I like that. Ian Happ is an interesting guy because I believe he's in the last year of arbitration or about to enter the last year of arbitration for his deal. He was one of the guys I was wondering at the beginning of the year, potentially as like a trade target for my Yankees in the outfield, depending upon, injuries, stuff like that. Obviously, Aaron Hicks stinks, so wouldn't hate him in center field. But I'm curious, like, how you feel about him long term. Is he a long term Cub, or do you think that he might get dealt at the deadline?
Well, he's 27 years old, and I still feel like a lot of his best baseball can be ahead of him. I just don't think he's a low. He's not a guy that after some of those early struggles has been a disaster for you. He's always going to play really good defense. He's extremely athletic. I like the fact that his eye has become sort of one of his better weapons at the plate. And he's done a better job of putting the ball in contact this year as well. So he's kind of taken all of his different weaknesses over the last several years and improved on them. And he's now one of the few guys left from those World Series years still with the ball club. So I think it's absolutely worth him staying around. He's 27 years old. If you get him to a reasonable extension, you can pay him until he's age 32, 33. And because he's so versatile, I could see sort of a Ben Zobrist type role where he can play all the different outfield spots. If you need to move him back to second base, you can. I think there's versatility, and I think that matters, especially in today's MLB.
Ben Zobrist, great name. Great player, too.
Yeah, helped two teams win back-to-back World Series for the Royals in 2015 and the Cubs in 2016. Was a fun guy to be able to cover here in Kansas City as well. We do have some baseball picks from our Twitter community. They wanted to weigh in today. But before we get into today's pick, we want to shout out Pump and Swag 33 on Twitter. Had the Red Sox and the Angels over last night. That game ended up going, I believe, to 11. So salute at Pump and Swag 33. Nice winner on the board for you today. We also have a play in Major League Baseball for one of the earlier games, and I am in full agreement with this play. Do we have the graphic? Yes, indeed we do. Diamondbacks Reds from our guy Cody over 9.5. He says the Reds average 6.26 runs per game at home. Reds over are 17-9-1 at Great American Ballpark. Merrill Kelly, the Diamondbacks starting pitcher, has a 5 road ERA and a whip of 1.4. And Minor gave up 5 runs, 3 home runs, including 2 doubles in 4 innings in his only start. I'm on board. And in fact, part of the reason that I'm on board is I like one of those daily dinger plays for Arizona tonight. Mike Minor in 4 innings, Peter, gave up 3 home runs. He's also been torched by right-handed hitting over the course of his career. I think this is an opportunistic time to jump on board with a lot of the runs. And I'm glad that he got it at 9.5 because right now at WinBet, that total is sitting all the way at 10. It's the highest on the slate tonight.
Yeah, I like this play a lot. Two bad pitchers, basically. So that's kind of how you have to go about some of these totals. Like, you get 2 bad starting pitchers, and the Reds don't have the greatest bullpen either. They have the worst team ERA in all of baseball. So runs are going to be scored in this game. I believe Arizona's kind of turned it around a little bit after a slow start offensively as well. So I like this play a lot, especially if you can get it at 9.5.
I was trying to remember. I don't know if you were able to tell about some of my recent 20-second posturing. I was trying to remember the name of the guy that I chose tonight for Daily Dinger, Jordan Luplow of Arizona. And part of the reason is he has 5 hits this year against left-handed pitching for Arizona. 4 of them are home runs.
Okay. That's 80% right there. If he gets a hit, 80%. I like that a lot.
Like those chances quite a bit. Before we dive into NBA props for tonight, let me go ahead and give you one of my other best bets on the WNBA side. One that I'm excited about. It should be a terrific game between the Chicago Sky and the Washington Mystics tonight in DC. Opportunity for a rematch game after Washington. I know that they were shorthanded on Sunday, Peter, but they were uncharacteristically awful on defense. They gave up 91 points, including 55 points to the Sky in the second half on the road. And listen, Chicago had one of those days, right? They shot 55.4% from the field. They went 9 of 20 from three-point range, 45%. Both of those statistical anomalies, especially from downtown. The Sky, I think, is a 31% three-point shooting team. So when you go 45%, you're just not going to repeat those numbers. And Washington came into that game with a top 2 defense in opponent points, as well as a top 2 defense in opponent points per 100 possessions, but obviously took a major turn after that game on Sunday. And they were shorthanded. They didn't have Elena Deladon. They didn't have their head coach. They didn't have their assistant coach. And I think Washington gets back to what they do best. I was actually very surprised to see them initially as a 1-point favorite, and the line has moved a ton. I got them earlier today, Peter, at -2.5. The line is currently -3.5 over at WinBet. But I think 3.5 is still a reasonable number. I don't know if I would go above that, but I do think Washington at home, getting everybody hopefully back and healthy, including their head coach, that's going to make a substantial difference. And I think anybody that's buying the Sky, who have beaten them twice this year, it's just not characteristic of how Washington traditionally plays defense. They're a really good defensive team. I think they'll do a much better job at home at limiting the Sky. So I do like Washington to cover tonight at home against the Sky.
I was going to ask you, Ben, I like that play a lot. I was going to ask you, because you've been kind of killing it in the WNBA this year, what have you found kind of the most success in? Has it been like betting favorites, or has it been, totals? I know you normally, the last few times we've been on the show, you've had a few totals that have done really well. So I'm kind of just interested in what because after this NBA season, WNBA is something I want to dive into a little bit more. So I'm intrigued. What has been your go-to?
Yeah, I think I wish I had sort of like a secret weapon. I know that Sunday, the one day that I was off, I was like, all right, I'm going to go ahead and share as many plays as I can because, the people need their WNBA picks, and ended up going 1 for 5 on the slate. So had a nice run and then just completely screwed up, including just a really bad beat in the Aces game on Sunday night. I've had more success so far, Peter, with totals this year. I feel like a lot of the projections for some of the teams that play fast. I'll give you an example. Atlanta is a team that plays fast this year. They're top 4 in pace, but they're bottom 3 in offensive points per 100 possessions. And you and I both have used that number quite a bit when going over NBA picks. It's not necessarily how fast you play, it's how efficient you are in scoring the basketball. And sometimes I feel like the lines are set knowing that these teams like to have a bunch of possessions and they play quickly. But if you're not scoring points, it really doesn't matter all that much. So sometimes you can get a bit of a soft spot in some of those numbers. And also, I really trust teams to bounce back. Seattle's been a bit of a frustrating team to bet on this year because they had great stretches and then they'll all of a sudden just turn on the Jets and score 83 points when they've been a really good top 3 defensive team, bottom 3 pace team, bottom 3 in offensive possessions per 100. They've been tough to try to handicap a little bit. But I've noticed more often than not, some of the totals tend to be a tad bit high, and unders have been probably my most successful play so far. That could change, obviously. It's a 12-team league with a lot of different trends happening all so often. But unders so far in the WNBA, depending on the matchup, you can usually find a soft spot there.
That's good to know. It's always nice to hear somebody, when they have a sport that they're really doing well at, how they handicap it. I always like to kind of pick people's brains. So I appreciate it.
It's been fun. It's been a lot of fun. And I know that Donovan has a play for tonight's slate over at BetSided as well. You can head on over to the site to check that out. All right, let's dive into the NBA a little bit. Obviously, we'll dive into the actual matchup itself for the game of the night. Before we get to your 2 plays and one of my plays when it comes to props tonight, we do have one Twitter user, one fan of BetSided that wanted to weigh in for tonight as well. And this one, let's see, it is from the franchise at KFrancis09. Jordan Poole over 2.5 assists, baby. Are you buying on baby Poole at 2.5 for tonight, Peter?
You talk about segues, and shout out to my guy Kevin for sharing that pick with us. I'm also taking Jordan Poole over 2.5 assists tonight in this game. So great minds think alike. You look at what Jordan Poole's done in these playoffs. 14 of his 18 games, he's picked up 3 or more assists, which seems kind of weird because he's really gotten most credit for scoring the ball. But he's actually a really underrated passer. He's averaging 4.3 assists per game in the playoffs. A lot of his minutes in the finals so far have come with Steph Curry out of the game because Boston has tried to attack both of them in switches defensively. So Steve Kerr kind of in game 2 realized I kind of have to stagger these minutes a little bit more, which I like. I think for Golden State, if you want Jordan Poole to kind of get going, the ball's got to be in his hands a decent amount. So if that's going to be the case, I also love him assist-wise to move the ball. Has turned the ball over a lot in this series, 7 through the first 2 games. But at the same time, Steve Kerr has also shown he does not care about leaving Jordan Poole out there in garbage time on either side. Right. So in game 1, when the Warriors got blown out, Jordan Poole still played some garbage time minutes in that fourth quarter at the end of the game. And then also in game 2, with the Warriors up by a ton at the end of the third quarter, Jordan Poole, unfortunately for me, because I had his under on his points, played the start of the fourth quarter for a good amount of time, ended up scoring 9 points over that stretch. So if you think we're going to get another blowout, which has honestly been pretty consistent with Celtics games in these playoffs, like on either side, Jordan Poole is probably still going to play pretty normal minutes either way. So I like him to get 3 assists here. I got it at plus money at plus 100. So I think that there's a ton of value in it too for something he's done in 14 of 18 games.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And you talked about the minutes. They've actually gone down in the last 2 games, but it hasn't stopped him from hitting it in one of his last 2 games as well. Had the 3 in the 107-88 win against Boston. Only came up with 2 in the 108-120 loss. But again, part of the reason was Golden State had that big lead. Boston came all the way back, and he was just a liability on the floor defensively. You just couldn't keep him in there. So I think this play makes all the sense in the world. A bit surprising to see it at plus value. I wonder if that's the current state, right?
I was surprised by that too.
Very surprising. So I have to imagine that's one that might have. I don't know if it's still available. I'll have to go ahead and check it out. But I do like that play for Poole quite a bit. Any other props that you have for tonight when it comes to Game 3 of the finals?
Yeah, so I have another one too that is. This one isn't as heavily statistically back. I'm taking Klay Thompson over 19.5 points. I got it at plus 105. And, Klay Thompson's been really bad these first 2 games of the finals. He's shooting 10 for 33. Just been absolutely terrible. But at the same time, he's taking a ton of shots. So, I've always talked about how volume kind of matters. He's taking 33 shots in 2 games. He's taking almost 17 shots a game in the playoffs. So, this number, when he's playing well, Klay's points prop is 21, 22.5. When he's playing poorly, we're starting to see a drop below 20. That's when I think you have to try and jump on it because he is a threat to get 20 every night just purely off the volume. Klay also has been making comments about how he's been watching footage of himself in previous playoff runs, making shots, which I don't want to read too much into it, but clearly there's a confidence thing here that's an issue for him. Steve Kerr left him in the game in the blowout, which I was shocked by given all the injuries that have happened to Klay at the start of that fourth quarter. And Jeff Van Gundy, I believe it was either him or Mark Jackson made a really good point. It's probably to try and get him going just because he had struggled in the series. The game was already pretty much in hand. Let's see if we can get Klay a couple easy baskets. It didn't necessarily work like that. But at the same time, I think it shows the confidence they have in him. He's going to get his shots. They're not going to go away from Klay Thompson. They might go away from Jordan Poole just because of the defensive issues. They are not going away from Klay Thompson. They will never go away from Klay Thompson. So I think getting him at plus money to score 20 points tonight, we're going to see a Klay game at some point in this series. He's had one game in every single playoff series where he's gone absolutely nuts. I don't know if it's going to be tonight, but at this number and plus money, I think it's worth a shot. In Game 3.
All right, so I don't want to give too much away because I have some thoughts on Klay Thompson coming up in a couple minutes that I think for those of you that are paying attention and watching the show, I think you're going to want to start to pay attention to. So I won't give away too much. However, I certainly get to play quite a bit considering you're talking about someone who can get incredibly streaky, who has the minutes, who's been a part of this run with this team. You're right. They're not going to take him out of the game because they know that once he gets hot, he can be as dynamic as anybody on the floor. So once the number, like you said, hits a certain threshold for Klay, I think that's absolutely the way to go. Let me give you another name to round out our NBA best bets of the night, and that's Draymond Green. Green comes in with a nice number when it comes to his assist prop. And there's might be some of you that don't love the idea of taking Draymond in a tough environment in Boston. You know that he's probably going to pick up a technical. There's always a possibility he could pick up 2. And he's only hit this number over 6 assists in 2 of his last 6 games. But I actually think him going to Boston, needing to play more minutes, is actually advantageous for him. I've mentioned this guy's name before. He does great work. Sal Vitri points out that Draymond Green, when he gets to that 30-minute mark in games in the postseason, he's averaging 6.8 assists per game. Boston's a short favorite at home at 3.5. Draymond should get a ton of minutes in this game because, especially given the Warriors' issues on the road in the third quarter, they've been so dominant at home. They're looking at, I'm trying to remember their specific number, but we're talking about plus 27.2 in net rating in the third quarter, minus 17 net rating on the road in the third quarter. They need Draymond's presence to slow down Boston, especially if the Celtics, for the first time this series, are going to be able to make the adjustments that they need. I project Draymond to have around 7 assists in this game. So the fact that I can get it at 6 feels like a reasonable number. He's going to be distributing the basketball. And especially if we like guys like Clay to finally bounce back and have a big game, that Draymond is going to be involved in helping to get him open. So 6 assists feels like a good number to be at. Yes, he has not hit this game in the last 66% of his games in the last 6, but I do think this is an opportunistic time because of the minutes that he'll get on the floor tonight.
I don't mind this at all. I think it's also advantageous that you can get the push at 6 because there's definitely a chance he can get the 6, and at least that way you're not losing the bet with him on that spot. But I think the thing with Golden State is, as much as I don't want to say this is a must-win game, you really don't want to lose Game 3 if you're them. You have to win. You win Game 3, you can afford to lose Game 4. I guess is kind of the way you have to look at this. If you're the Warriors, you lose
Right.
Game 3, now there's a chance you're down 3-1, which we've seen time and time again is extremely hard to come back from in the NBA. So I think we see a lot of Steph, a lot of Draymond. Steve Kerr let Game 1 kind of get away by going away from Steph in the fourth quarter because he thought they were safe. I don't think he does that again the rest of the series. I think he's going to be smart and be like, hey, we're going to ride our guys. It's the NBA Finals. We're not going to give them a game because we decide to do something. So I like this a lot for Draymond if he gets the minutes. I am a little concerned because the number 1 technical foul giving out referee is on this game. I forgot the name already. But so Draymond, the chance of him getting tossed, I believe it's David Guthrie is giving out the most technical fouls. Yeah. So that, and Scott Foster's on tonight. So this, who knows what's going to happen tonight? I have no, this is going to be bedlam tonight, but Draymond knows how to push the needle, it seems like, and then stop just before he gets the second tech. So hopefully he stays in this game. I think if he does, he hits this.
It's going to be fun because they're going to rile him up, and he's talked about it in post-game press conferences that he's fully embraced it as well. So let's take a quick look at the board for our best bets of the night. A little recap session. You are going with the over on Jordan Lyles strikeouts at home for the Baltimore Orioles against the Chicago Cubs. 3 overs on the board for my guy, Peter Dewey. Love to see it. Over 19.5 points for Klay Thompson in Game 3 on the road against Boston, and also over on 2.5 Jordan Poole assists. I also have a couple overs on the board. I like the over against Jordan Lyles for Cubs outfielder Ian Happ, 1.5 total bases. I like the Washington Mystics to cover at -2.5. Again, that number has since moved to -3.5 over at WinBet, but I like them at home to cover even at that number against the Sky. And then over 6 for Draymond Green assists in the ball game tonight. Again, you get to that magic number of 30 minutes. He averages 6.8 assists per game in the postseason. So we'll go over our best bets. In case you're just joining us, we'll do it one more time at the end of the show before we head on out of here. But let's dive into something that I think will be a lot of fun because we are at the Game 3 point. The series is tied. If you're looking at the series odds over at WinBet, Boston is just a slight favorite to win the NBA Finals. -115 right now is the number for Boston against Golden State. But where you can still find some potential value is in NBA Finals MVP. Coming into the series, Peter, we know that it was Steph Curry who was the decisive favorite on the board, followed by Jason Tatum. And then you had a sizable block behind them. Right now, if you're taking a look at the 2 favorites, it's Curry at WinBet at -108. Tatum comes in at +110, which is basically an indication that the odds makers over at WinBet in Vegas predict that if the Warriors win this series, it's going to Steph. And if the Celtics win this series, it's going to Tatum. However, if you're looking to go a little bit further down, there are some intriguing names with a lot of players that could potentially get involved. Jaylen Brown, 9-1 for the Boston Celtics. Al Horford is 50-1. Draymond Green is 75-1, as is Marcus Smart. And if you're looking to really start to dive back a little bit, you can get Andrew Wiggins at 100-1 and Jordan Poole and Klay Thompson at 150-1. So now that we basically have an opportunity here, Peter, for a redo on our NBA Finals MVP votes, if you're going through the list right now, if you're trying to say to yourself, is there somebody that I feel offers the best value at this point? Who would that guy be for you?
Yeah, Ben, I'm going to stick with my original pick, and I know that the board behind me says Steph Curry Finals MVP, and I do kind of hope he wins Finals MVP, but I'm sticking with Jaylen Brown to win Finals MVP because I have Celtics in 7. So if I'm going to stick true to my Celtics pick and I'm going to stick true to Jaylen Brown, and the way I kind of look at this is like, I don't think Jason Tatum right now deserves to be as heavily favored as he is because he had a bad game 1. Like, yes, he had 13 assists. Jason Tatum shot 3 for 17. Like, when you have a game like that, we saw it happen to Steph in the 2018 finals, I believe it was. He had a bad game 3 or game 4, and it cost him Finals MVP. He was going to win Finals MVP over Kevin Durant. He had a bad game for him. He had a down shooting night. KD had a regular game. They lost the game. They came back, won the series in game 5. Steph played great, and they're like, nope, Kevin Durant's the MVP because he played good in the game that you guys lost. Right. So, yes, they won. The other thing I think works against Jason Tatum is the game he played well in. He was also minus 36, and they lost. Jaylen Brown didn't have a great game, but Jaylen Brown was the driving force in that comeback in game 1. Right now, Jaylen Brown averaging over 20 a game in the series. He's probably not going to put up the assist numbers that Tatum has, but his rebounding's been really solid this postseason. He's averaging 6.8 per game. So if he continues to hit the glass, and I will give Jaylen Brown a ton of credit. He's been very consistent in terms of every night he's around 20 points. There's no games that he's really having these horrible, horrible shooting nights like Tatum. I think he has one game that he has less than 15 points in these playoffs. So he's had a 12-point game against Miami in game 5, I believe, is one of the games they lost. So I really think there's value on Jaylen Brown here. I think it's going to depend, like him and Tatum. Somebody's going to have it going for them every single night, it seems like. But Brown at 9-1, I think, is the furthest I'd go, just because the other guys on the Celtics, like Al Horford had that fantastic game 1, scored 2 points in game 2. Him and Marcus Smart are just so volatile that unless you are really going to go off the Andre Iguodala method of, well, this guy guarded Steph Curry or this guy guarded whoever, I don't see how they can win MVP. So I like Jaylen Brown. I think he's got some value if he has some good scoring games.
I think that makes plenty of sense, and especially since we all expect to see more of a usage rate for Jason Tatum. Man, Brown's usage rate in this series has been unbelievable. 34.9% in game 2, 33.8%. The ball has gone through him a ton, and he's more than capable. And think about that game against Miami when he dropped 40 on him. If Brown takes over the series and Tatum continues to be locked up, I know he played better, but I think Brown at 9-1 odds, especially if you're on the side of the Celtics, boy, that makes all the sense in the world. And I think you're looking at terrific, terrific value. And listen, I think someone says, well, a lot of times, Brown is just going to be a guy that's going to go ahead and load up on points. The numbers speak very differently. This is somebody that can fill up the stat sheet with assists. He has 14 over his last 3 games. Rebounding wise, you mentioned he's right around 6.5 over his last 3. So Brown can fill it up in a wide variety of ways. And if the numbers stand out and Tatum continues to struggle with the shot, I think that's a great, great play when it comes to opportunities for NBA and MVP in this series. So yeah, the call on Jaylen Brown, certainly intriguing one. Can I throw a dark horse your way? Can I throw a wild card into the mix?
As long as you don't say Nemanja Bjelica, I'll be okay with a dark horse.
Okay, it is not Bjelica. He is not my dark horse pick to win NBA Finals MVP. But with Steph, I suppose decent odds, near even money odds is considered a good value bet. And I do believe the Warriors will win the finals, and I do expect him to win the MVP. But Klay Thompson is 150-1. Yes, the same Klay Thompson that is going back on YouTube and watching his old films and trying to figure out what the hell's going on with his jump shot. Peter, he's not going away. Like, the Warriors need Klay to be successful. And all of a sudden, if he starts heating up, like he's had multiple 30-point games over the course of the playoffs, mixed in some bad numbers as well. The 11 points against Boston in game 2, I think actually doesn't matter as much because it was a blowout win for them. But yeah, 4 of 19 from the floor with only 1 3-pointer made isn't great. But there's reasons why the Warriors are trying to get him going, because they need Klay Thompson to be successful. And all of a sudden, if Thompson starts making some shots, it opens things up for Curry. It opens things up for Poole. The rest of the offense can start to get going. And think about the perspective and the narrative. If all of a sudden Klay Thompson is starting averaging about 25, 30 points in this series and playing good defense along the way and holding Boston, holding your guy Jaylen Brown, maybe it's a little bit of switches on Tatum as well, he's more than capable of showing up at an opportunistic time and stealing this MVP award away from Steph Curry. I think this is an opportunity for, at 150-1, you throw a little pizza money on it and hope that Klay just hits fire. You're already on his over for game 3, Peter. You can't poo-poo this idea, because all he needs is one game to slowly start that confidence back. And once it's back, we've seen how dangerous he can be.
This has to be the tiniest sprinkle of all time if you're going to sprinkle on this. And the reason I say that, Ben, like, I don't disagree with you. The Warriors need Klay to win the series. He has to be better if they want to beat this Boston team. The issue is, it's like when you look traditionally at NBA Finals guys who win NBA Finals MVP, like, one game sometimes can take you completely out of the running. That's what scares me with Tatum. The thing he got lucky with is his bad game they won. So he got away with, like, that isn't going to – they're not going to look back and be like, oh, well, if Jason Tatum played better in game 1, maybe the whole series changed. Like, they won that game. And yes, Klay did not play good in game 2 and the Warriors won, so you can kind of watch that. But, like, it's 10 for 33 in the series. Something I wanted to bring up that I think is, like, to put it in perspective, Steph Curry didn't get a single Finals MVP vote in 2015. This is why I have the sign up. He averaged 26, 6, and 5 in that series. Over all those numbers. He averaged 26, did not get a single Finals MVP vote because he had one game that he scored 19 points and shot terribly from the field. And the voters were like, nope, it's Andre Iguodala. We're all set on it. So I don't see, like, unless this goes 7 and Klay plays 5, like, banger games and the Warriors win in 7, I just, like, if they win in 6 or if they somehow win in 5, like, the margin for error for Klay now is, like, he has to be like 30, 30, 30 every night. Like, if he has another down game, it's just going to be like, yeah, he played 3 games in this series where he was, like, one of the worst players on the floor. Like, that's the unfortunate part. Game 2, Klay, he was one of the worst players on the floor. Like, it wasn't huge.
No, he wasn't good.
It was bad.
So this is why he's at 151.
Yeah, exactly.
I understand, Peter, that he has not been good.
It's been tough, but I get that the sprinkle makes sense because he is one of the few guys in the NBA who has the ability to, like, completely take over a game. And so, yes, like, that, from that perspective, it makes sense. It just gets me nervous that, like, you're basically banking on, like, a bunch of games. So that's why I say, like, the tiniest sprinkle. Don't think this is, like, even if he has a good game tonight, like, he's still a long shot because of the way the first 2 games went.
Yes. Although, if he goes for 30 tonight, that 150 probably drops to about 75.
Oh, yeah. No, you're 100% right to jump on it now. I agree with that, too. Like, this is probably the longest. Unless he puts up another stinker tonight, which at that point you wouldn't want to bet it anyway. Like, this is the spot to get it because if he has a good game, it's going to drop. But, like, if he has a bad game, there's literally no chance he can win it. So, yeah, that makes sense.
All right. Well, we'll see whether or not Klay is able to turn that sprinkle into a nice payday for your boy. But it's also a narrative-based award. Let's not forget that Iguodala got it because of, a certain moment. I'll say that. And Thompson coming back from all those injuries, if he's the decisive factor, if the series goes to 6 or 7, and he's the difference maker, they might just punt and say, you know what, give it to Klay. He's earned it. He deserves this.
Poor Steph, man. Nobody deserves a Finals MVP more than Steph Curry.
That's
I will die
also
on that
very,
mountaintop.
very true. Yes. Also very, very true. I can't argue that. But we'll see how it ends up going down. He's got Brown. I've got Klay. If we're looking for a few dark horse options when it comes to the NBA Finals MVP. But let's dive into the actual matchup. over at WinBet tonight. It is our game of the night. If you're still looking to vote on who you think is going to win, what your best bet is for the game, you can head on over to our YouTube channel. For anybody that's watching the live stream over on Twitter, head on over to YouTube, search BetSided. You can participate in the online poll. We will read the results following our picks for the game. You can also find the poll, by the way, on Twitter as well, at BetSided, to weigh in. So line for tonight, you have the Warriors 3.5-point dogs on the road in Boston. If you're looking for a money line play on Golden State, it's plus 135. Boston comes in for game 3 at minus 165. And the total, after going down to 212, has now moved up to 213. Peter, I'm going to start with you. Overall perspective of the game tonight. What's your thought process, and where is your best bet taking you?
Yeah, I'll start with the best bet because it kind of goes into my thought process. I'm taking Boston minus 3.5 in this game. I know I've been on the show a million times and have bet the Celtics, but like it's also winning, so I'm just gonna keep doing it. That's just the way. That's the way it's been. I had one of my buddies who's a Celtics fan go. He was like, Pete, I think you bet the Celtics every single game in these playoffs, and I was like, yeah, and they're in the finals, so like, why wouldn't I keep doing it? Like, there's no reason not to. So I think Boston wins this game. And when you look at the way the Celtics have played in these playoffs, the games that they've lost, it's been a constant theme. They've turned the ball over a ton. They turned the ball over 18 times in game 2. It led to 33 points for the Warriors. If they stay away from the turnovers, I really think they can control the game. They're a better defensive team. They kind of have a little bit more juice scoring the ball right now with the way Klay Thompson's been playing. And Jordan Poole, I know he had 17 points in game 2, but it was all garbage time points. Like, it's really been Steph or nothing for the Warriors on offense. Yeah. And then real quick, because I want you to kind of weigh in on your thoughts so we can get the little back and forth going. But there's 2 stats I looked at. Celtics have not lost back-to-back games in these playoffs. They have also gone 12-1 after a loss since January 29th. And then the other one is teams that lost game 2 as road dogs. When they come back in game 3, they have gone 6-0 straight up, 4-1-1 against the spread since 2003. So this just feels like it's setting up for another Celtics bounce back where they shoot the lights out again. Like, they shot over 40% from 3 in both games. So unless something drastically changes shooting the ball, like, as long as they take care of the ball, they're the better team. It's just that's been their Achilles heel all playoffs.
You're right. And it's hard to argue with some of those historical trends as well, especially for Boston, who really have kind of let this series go to waste in the third quarter. Now, granted, they were able to have a 40-16 run in the 4th of game 1 to steal that game away, but that actually leads into my best bet of the night, and that's to take the under. Initially was fine with it at 212. I love it even more at under 213. These games, Peter, were well on their way to hitting the under in both of them, and then if not for that 40-16 run by Boston in game 1, we're probably looking at 2 straight unders to begin this series. Golden State in the third quarter, I mentioned this earlier in the show, 73 points compared to, I think, 38 for Boston. So the Celtics defense has fallen apart, and their offense has been lackadaisical in that quarter. I don't think that's going to be the case here tonight because I've another stat that I mentioned a little bit earlier. At home in the third quarter, the Warriors net rating is plus 27.3. On the road, it's minus 17. So what that tells me is that either Golden State's going to let up defensively in the third quarter, or they're just not going to be able to score. And I'm going with the latter because of how good and how dominant Boston's defense has been all year. Remember, Peter, these are still the top 2 defensive rated teams in the NBA. And I still think people forget that about the Warriors, is that they still are an elite defensive team. But because of how dominant Boston has been, really going back to the start of January, the Warriors defensively have kind of just been out of sight, out of mind until we started to see what they did to Boston in the third quarter. So these games, I feel like, should be probably set at around 206, 207. The fact that it's moved up to 213, go ahead and give me the under all day. I feel like this is one of those series. Again, a lot of half-court offense, some isolation, especially with Tatum and Steph. This is slow it down, playoff physical basketball. And in Boston, it just doesn't strike me as a game where it's going to be in the 100s, even in the 110s as this game and series moves on.
I think it's interesting too. I like the underplay. I think it's interesting too when you look at like how are teams going to get easy baskets in this series? And like for Golden State, like the only way they're getting easy baskets has been turnovers in transition. Like even their like easy looks on offense, like they're working like 20 seconds of the shot clock, really moving the ball. And like, yeah, maybe Steph gets a good look or Clay gets a good look, but like there hasn't been like Boston, the benefit, and we talked about this prior to the series, like Boston switching everything kind of takes away some of the Warriors' backdoor cuts and the off-ball movement that's so like they're so famous for. When you switch everything, it's really hard to get a breakdown on defense where somebody just turns their head. Like if you're setting a back screen, they're switching it. The guy's right there. So that is something I think is also interesting. Like there hasn't been a ton of easy baskets. Like that fourth quarter that Boston put on in game one, like they hit some crazy contested threes. Tatum, Derek White, like Horford had some wide open looks because they were kind of scheming that. Yeah. But at the same time, like this hasn't been like, you know, up and down track meet style of basketball. Like you said, it hasn't been that. So I like the under as well. I think it's worth like looking at. You have to look at like the defensive profiles of these teams and like how are they going to win the game. And like if Boston wants to win this game, they have to keep the Warriors in the half court. So I think Ime Udoka is going to make a big emphasis on we can't turn the ball over because he sounded pissed about it in game two. And every time in the end of the quarters when they cut to the coach interview, they like asked him, "What do you guys have to do better?" And the first thing out of his mouth was turnover. So I can't see 18 Boston turnovers again tonight. I just don't see it happening.
I don't see it happening either. Between the lack of turnovers from Boston's side and also not getting their ass kicked in the third quarter, this seems to set up well for Boston at -3.5. And good news is the community agrees with your best bet, Peter. The BetSided community once again going with us for the second straight day. Celtics -3.5. You can find those odds over at WinBet. It's pretty consensus as far as I'm concerned. If you're if WinBet is not available in your state, you can go ahead and find a consensus as well. Boston -3.5. They are going to make it a 2-1 series lead. I'll probably end up putting far too much money on the Warriors to try and go ahead and win back the series. But a conversation for another day. Speaking of another day, Peter, Daily Betslip will be back on again tomorrow. Got the Thursday crew of Donovan Smoot and Ian McMillan. They'll be talking plenty of NBA Finals, but also the game of the night for tomorrow. Can't imagine it being anything other than the two guys that talk the most hockey on our channel, the Rangers and the Lightning. Game 5 headed back to MSG. I know that plenty of Justin Bieber fans are hoping that this series wraps up in the event that Bieber is supposed to come in for Game 7. Hopefully that whole situation gets figured out, because the last thing you want is believers ruining the fun of the Stanley Cup Finals. And also, if you're right here hanging out on YouTube with us, make sure you guys stick around. Coming up at 7 o'clock, the latest edition of Jab Cross Hook is tonight, 7 o'clock Eastern. They're going to go over their best bets for UFC 275. Peter, a pleasure as always. Appreciate the insight. Always a lot of fun talking hoops and betting with you. We will be back again tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern time for the Daily Betslip. Again, make sure you guys stick around tonight for Jab Cross Hook to get your UFC betting plays in for UFC 275. For Peter, I'm Ben. Big thanks to Joanne, our producer and director, for another awesome show. We will talk to you again tomorrow. May all of your best bets hit. So long, everybody.